We're starting a new series. We decided we're going to go into a bit to the Old Testament. We forget about the Old Testament a lot of the time, don't we? We focus really a lot on the Gospels and the New Testament, and we don't do a lot of the Old Testament. So we're going to do a series on Jonah now that takes us up to pancakes. And then we've got some more Old Testament stuff looking at... what was the theme called? It's not patriarchs and matriarchs because it's their wives. But anyway, we're going to look at that through Lent. So we've got Old Testament up until Easter, and then Jesus can come and put us right on that. So I was thinking about, I'm doing the first bit, and I'm looking at calling. I always get the things on calling, don't they? I'm going to tease Tim now. Has Liverpool just finished playing? Has Liverpool just finished playing? Oh, okay. I just thought you'd come in after a match. So I've got the bit on calling, which is why it's so short, the first 3 verses. And then the other people preaching on the series of Jonah get the more exciting bits. But this is exciting too. But I was thinking about sat-navs. Now, probably most of you use one here, I would think. In the morning service, it may be less likely so because they use the good old faithful match, which quite often I have to admit is probably better than the sat-nav. But, you know, I'm pretty happy using the sat-nav and trusting that it's going to find out the best route for me and the fastest route. And, you know, we all try and race the time to make it a bit faster than it is. The only time I intentionally just don't listen to it is when I'm in places like Devon and Cornwall, because it's likely to take you up a small country path that you can't get through, or you're going to get stuck in a ditch or something. So there I kind of think, yeah, not going down that little road, I'll stick to the main road and it can reroute. But there are times when I just think I know better. And I'm not going to listen, because of course there's a shortcut going that way, and it will be much quicker than what Waze could have calculated is the fastest route. And I end up round the corner, gridlocked and nowhere to go in that time. I think since the Garden of Eden, we have been humanity and a people that know how to do it better, and then find out that we don't. And I don't know what it is in us. I think there's a bit of maybe a sense of adventure. I quite like that, being the rebel, that we like to do it our own way. I can resonate with that. Sometimes it's just pure laziness, and we don't want to do what we should do. And other times, I think that it is just the easy way out. You know, the easy way is to do it our way rather than pick ourselves up and do something that's a bit more difficult and a bit more directional from the Lord. And so I think that's kind of what motivates us. But our Christian walk is not much different. Our Christian walk is somewhere where we're going to walk with the Lord and grow and hopefully learn and deepen our faith on that journey. But there are times when we think we can do it better when God asks us to do things. And He may ask us to do things in a personal capacity. So it may be about a calling in terms of acts of service, because our calling will normally match where the passion is and where we want to serve. That will be our calling, where God calls us to work. But also, sometimes He calls us within our lives to make some changes, to maybe give something up so that we can be at church, to change our patterns in life so that we can do something for the Lord, to maybe do less social things so that there's time to pray. I don't know what it is. And through our lives, there'll be these personal things that God is calling us to do, and there'll be these corporate things that God is calling us to do, things we're called to do as a church or as a nation or as with others in whatever we're doing. But it's not always easy, God's calling, and inevitably struggle will come. I'm busy doing, I always do the Bible in the year, just the readings of Bible in the year. I don't do any commentaries with it, but so we're going through Genesis at the moment, and on the back of Christmas with Joseph, I've been looking at God's calling on people's lives. And if you think about Joseph, Jesus' dad, right? And there was the bit after Jesus was born, and it would have been so much simpler if the Lord had just said, can you just get yourself to Nazareth, because that's where Jesus needs to grow up. And they could have been on a direct route to Nazareth. But no, in a dream, he says, you better get running because you're going to be in trouble. And then he runs one way and he said, oh, don't go there because it's going to be worse. And eventually, as he dreams and gets the Lord and whatever's happening in front of him, he eventually gets to the place where Jesus is going to grow up. Abraham is another one I was reflecting on. I mean, Abraham is going to be the father of nations, the father of so many. And yet God waits for his wife to be barren and 100 before she falls pregnant. I mean, wouldn't it have been easier to, when he was younger, give him lots of babies so the father of many nations could be started then? And then when he does get told that his wife of 100 is now going to have a baby and he laughs, the Lord is not very happy about that. And so he is mute for the entire time of her pregnancy until John is born. And I think, well, it's a bit harsh on him. Lord, I would have laughed too. But then I wondered, this morning when I was thinking about it, I was thinking, I wonder what he learned in the silence. I wonder what he learned when he couldn't speak. And the obvious one that we all know about and children would know about is poor Joseph, right? Joseph could have been made the leader of Egypt, gone to school, been taught how to be a good leader, had a good mentor, everything we do in business. No, he has to go and spend 20 years in jail for something he didn't do, disappointed by people, that God grows him into the leader he is with the most compassionate and forgiving heart. And so calling and our journeys tend to be with struggle, out of our choices of things we do, maybe out of the choices of others that impact us to get us to where we're going to do. Now you've got Jonah, and Jonah is one of the minor prophets, and there's 12 of them, and they're at the back of the Old Testament, and they're those quick little books that you can read that go very quickly. And poor Jonah is one of these prophets that's not like the others. Obadiah is before him, and he kind of is more of what we think of a prophet, or like Isaiah, or what God gives them these words, and they have these wonderful things like Shakespeare, right? They can stand and they can speak, and the Lord's saying this, and the Lord's saying if you don't repent and if you don't do this, this is what's going to happen, but then he's going to bless you and he's going to do this. Poor Jonah has to actually go to the place and deal with the people. And so his calling is, now go to Nineveh, where they're all wicked, and tell them if they don't repent, that's it. I'm done with them and I'm going to destroy them. I mean, that's not really what you want to go and do as a prophet, right? You don't want to do that. And he most definitely didn't want to do it. So God says, go, and he says, no way, and he goes in the opposite direction. Is that familiar with anyone here? And he ends up in Tarshish. And the verse says, he was like, and he was fleeing from the Lord. I mean, what was he thinking? How can you get away from the Lord, even in Tarshish? I mean, it wasn't going to work, was it? But I wonder when he had been through all he'd been through, and he reflected on his life, as we do as we get older, and you see where God is working and what he's done, that he doesn't say that was the most incredible journey with the Lord, where he grew the most, where he changed the most, where he learned about God's heart and led his people. Because in that struggle is where we are molded, where we are formed, where God changes us, where God builds our heart for that. And he learned in his journey, didn't he? He learned that saying no and going the opposite direction is probably not what you should do, because you're going to end up in the stomach of a whale. And now let's hope that doesn't happen to us. I'm not sure it's happened to anyone else and survived. But what did he learn about God in that, right? He's going to be thrown overboard by the pagans, and yet a whale saves him. The Lord has mysterious and wonderful ways and does the impossible to protect us, to get us to where we are going. He also learns how he gains a heart for praying for the others and for seeking God for them. And then he learns about the compassion God has, because he gets so angry at the end of the passage because God isn't punishing them, and you need to punish them, Lord. His own self-righteousness and his own thinking of this is how it should be makes him angry. And he misses that God is a compassionate and forgiving God. And when he works, what does he learn? So through his struggle of his calling and his journey, God uses him and grows him and turns a nation. And I think the things with our calling, whether he's asking us to do small things for the Lord or he's asking us to do big things, and we'll have varied things through our lives in different spheres of our lives as he calls us to do different things, it's not so much about the doing. I mean, you must do. Don't now stop doing. But that's not what God is looking for. Because quite frankly, he can get another vicar at All Saints. He can get another worship band. He can get, I don't know, he doesn't need us specifically to do that thing. Because there are other people that he can do. I mean, there's 8 billion people on the planet, right? A few people he's got a choice of. So it's not so much about the doing. It's about our heart and our response to what he's asking us to do. And that's what matters. But I can tell you, out of experience, unless you're all much better than I am, which I'm sure you are, is that at some point, you are going to disobey what God asks you to do. You're going to say no. You're not going to do it. And I think I've learned enough about the Lord to know the Lord probably knows that you're going to do it. And he has a kind of a plan B. You may not like plan B either, so be careful. But he has a kind of a plan B. And I think sometimes he calls us, and actually it doesn't matter which thing we choose, because he just wants us to respond. So I was speaking to someone this week trying to decide what church they go to, because they feel that they need to go to church. And we can all discuss the churches, they're good and they're bad, and we all have both. And even if it's all good in the beginning, we're a family and we get it wrong, and we do life together. And so, at the end of the conversation, I'm like, it doesn't actually matter. God doesn't actually mind where you end up being in church. Just get to church. Be in the place where he's called you to be. At other times, we may know he's calling us to do the one thing, and we choose to do something else, or we say we can't do it. I've seen that quite a lot with clergy, where really they are called to uproots with their children and everything, and they just can't do it. And I think sometimes God is gracious in that, when we've searched and we've struggled and we make some decisions, whatever they might be, because we just can't go against that. And I think God honors that sometimes. And I think he then finds a new calling or a new way of expressing that calling in the place that's been, prayerfully sought out and admitted to the Lord in there. And then at other times, we are like poor Jonah, where you're just not going to be let off the hook. And God is going to stick to his guns and say, I don't care what you want. You're going to Nineveh. And until we go to Nineveh, it's not going to go so well, and we're never going to get to the place we need to get to with him. So what is it in us then that doesn't just say, yes, I'm going to do whatever you call us? Because I think if Jesus walked in the door now in the second coming, and he walked in here and he said, Donna, go and do this. I just cannot believe you'd say no. You'd be like Peter. You'd be like, yeah, I'm all in. I'm going. And we mess up along the way. But you'd be in, wouldn't you? I think it would be really hard to say to Jesus, if you love him, like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. So what is it in us that we then think that we can't do something? And so I've got a few things here. So I think one is that we can sometimes be just downright stubborn. You're just not going to do it because you're not going to do it. And it's a bit like a toddler who wants something and is going to fight until the end, probably knowing full well they're going to have to do it anyway. And you are looking at the 3-year-old that didn't want to go to bed, and piece by piece threw her bed down the stairs. I can tell you I still went to bed with a very disgruntled father. And at that, we can just be stubborn sometimes and not respond. I think sometimes we can just be lazy and apathetic. Life is, we're doing this, we're doing that. It's a bit of an effort to do that. I'm just going to sit. Netflix is much better, and it's really cold. I'm just going to stay in bed this afternoon. I'll go and see that person tomorrow. I'll read my Bible tomorrow when, I've cleared the house and I've got my chair in the room and I can have a cup of tea and I can sit down with the Lord, and then the phone rings. I think we're just lazy and not intentional about it. I think third thing is that calling can be disruptive to our lives. It doesn't mean you have to move, but it can be very disruptive, and it takes it out of our comfort zone. John Ortberg, in his book, says it's a spiritual discomfort. It's a spiritual comfort zone that the Lord is trying to get you out of to grow. We've got to take that step to get out of the boat, as it were, and out of our spiritual comfort zone. And quite frankly, we live in a society that likes comfort and nice things and an easy life and what we want. And if God's going to come and tell us he wants differently, we're quite frankly not interested. And I see it more and more with the younger generation. I've had a conversation this week, and I apologize now in advance to the Gen Zs because I am a Gen Y. And I was having a conversation with my friend's daughter in her mid-20s. I've known her parents since I was 8, and I've known her all her life, obviously. And I can have a reasonable conversation. I can have a reasonable conversation with most Gen Z people. And I was sitting with her, and I was just like, honestly, I have become the old person I never wanted to become, where I'm starting to say, I can't believe the young people of today. What are they like? I've just turned into my mother. And I said, I am so sorry, but I just don't get Gen Z. I just don't get them. I don't understand them. I don't know how they're going to live this life. I don't know how they're going to run the world. I just don't know. I don't know because I sit and see them as being far too comfortable. And I think we're to blame. I mean, I can't be to blame because I don't have children. No, that's not. I am to blame because I spoil my godchildren, and I think we make it easy for them, and we have children later, possibly a lot of the time. They have not seen struggle necessarily. I mean, I'm not dismissing that there are poorer families than that, but generally we've been able to give. We've been in a position in nice homes or giving opportunities. We're at rugby, we're at swimming, we're at ballet, we're at whatever else every day doing something with them. We want to give the best for them, and that heart is right. I'm not just disputing that heart is right. But what we've grown is a generation too comfortable, but they're still at home at 27 and think it's, their right to have a home or their rent paid or whatever, because obviously I want my independence and you should provide it for me. I've seen it a lot. I get in many conversations with people. And one of the conversations I had this week was about getting a driver's license. In South Africa, you have to be 18 to get your driver's license. And my friends were saying that they don't get their driver's license anymore. Well, that's okay. In the UK, you have buses and trains. There is no public transport system in South Africa, right? So when I was growing up, you did not celebrate on your 18th birthday. You had booked your appointment and you were down the driving testing yard and you were getting your driver's license so you could get out without your parents. And yet here we've got people in their mid-20s where their parents are taking them everywhere in their car because they don't want to get their driver's license. I'm so sorry, I just do not get Gen Z. The hopeful thing I had was because Aaron was talking about, we now have Gen Z A. So I reckon my generation one day, long time to come, will be coming back into fashion sometime in the distant future of that. But it's not only the young people. I think us too. We're so comfortable. We have what we have. We have all the entertainment. We can afford quite a lot within reason. We have, trust me, we have what we want a lot of the time. And the calling comes and disrupts that. And it's not easy. And that makes it difficult for us to do because it's no longer comfortable. And then briefly, the other two is sometimes we want somebody else's calling. We look at their calling and we think we want to be them. That's who we want to be. And part of that is good because we should aspire and God uses us to see different things. But I remember Stephanie coming and we were talking about ordination and she's training for ordination now. But one of the very first things I made her do, she was at the back here. We were taking up pews in the front here. Do you remember this? And we bought the Go Pack table trolley. And it got delivered. And so I got her a screwdriver and I said, here you go, build that. And she's like, well, I've never built anything before. And I'm like, if you want to go into ministry, you better start building because this is 1 hour of your week. The rest is that. And start building. We want somebody else's calling because we see the bits we like. We don't understand the cost and all the other things that come with it. And I'm sure Jonah wanted Obadiah's calling. That was much better. And none of us want Jonah's calling, let's be honest, in that. So sometimes we want something, we don't fully understand what the cost is. And then lastly, which I think is the one that's biggest, that stops us and resonates with most of us, and probably, if not all of us, we've experienced it, and it's fear. When we know we should be doing something, when God stirs our heart, and sometimes you may not know it's God, but he's stirring, convicting about behaviors or changes or whatever. When he's stirring our heart, it's fear. You know, and I can think of two times that I had that with the calling. One was for me to come back and live in the UK. So we immigrated when I was 7, and I had a very clear word that I had to come to the UK, and I'd have a ministry with hundreds of children, which I can say now, nearly 24 years later, that's true. Some of you have borne witness to that. But I remember getting that word and thinking, oh, I have to leave my family. I have to leave my job that I know here, where I know all my network and I'm successful. I have to leave. What happens if I can't afford a house? What happens if I'm not successful? Where do I go from there? All these different things. But I think there was something in that calling that also had a sense of adventure. I'm going to go live in a new country. I'm going to go try something new. And I could always go back if I needed to. There's something. So that one I didn't find as difficult, to be honest. I got the prophetic word, and 3 weeks later I was here working in a job in a house. So, I mean, it was very much of the Lord. But then the struggle that I've had, and I've shared most commonly, is the one for ordination. And that I struggled with till the end, and I still struggle with some days. It has been the most costly thing I've had to do for the Lord. And I don't mind it. It's wonderful most of the time. But it hasn't been easy. But there was fear with that. There was fear. I stopped my earning power. I had a good corporate job. I stopped my earning power. I don't have children that will look after me one day. I don't have a big inheritance coming. Am I financially secure when I'm old? Where will I live? What happens if he goes and asks me to live in, I don't know, Bradford? I don't know, nothing wrong with Bradford, but I just like, whatever, Hounslow, somewhere not Hampton. I mean, as it turns out, the Lord called me to Hampton, praise the Lord. Maybe not for you, but for me. And I could quite nicely in here. But all those things could and nearly did stop me. Fear gets in the way of us stepping out for the Lord when we can't see how it works. And so then we behave like Jonah, and we run away. And sometimes, quite frankly, out of fear of that calling, we can sometimes self-sabotage so that we don't deliver on that calling. And it's just fear that drives us and drives our behaviors in that. And I think Jonah experienced a couple of those. I think he maybe experienced the comparative calling with the other prophets. But I would imagine that going to tell a wicked nation that you're wicked and God doesn't approve is not the easiest of callings to go and do, and he would have been quite fearful of that. So what do we learn from Jonah? Where do we take from here? What is God saying to you today? And you will all be stirred in some way about calling. Just what is God convicting you of? It may be just to come to church. That may be the thing he's calling you to do right now. He may be calling you to readjust your diary, to make time. He may be calling you into something bigger, I don't know, into a ministry or into doing something. He may be calling you to be there for your neighbor or to pray. I don't know what it is. There will be something for all of you that he will be stirring in your heart. And so the first thing I'm going to say is obviously say yes, right? But for all the reasons I've mentioned, that may not be so easy. So I guess the challenge is, do you trust God enough to step out and do it? Because the thing with all these things that God asks us to do in the yes, there may be some little easy things away. I don't want to tell you they're all difficult, but in the yes, there is always a step of uncertainty, because that is faith. Faith is not sure. Our hope in God is sure. His love for us is sure. Our faith is stepping out into uncertainty and trusting he is going to be with us, and he is going to lead us, and he's going to get us where he needs to get us to for our calling, for our purpose, for who we are and who we are meant to be for his kingdom. He always wants what's best for us. And it's very easy for me to say to you, don't fear it, because I've been there to fear it and still do. But it is that trust, that one simple step of just saying, I'm going to do this uncertain as I am, and I'm going to give it a go. Amen.